We have with us State Senator Elaine Bowers. She is from the 36th Senate District, and very new to the studios and new to constituents. We have Bill Pannbacker. He is the 106th House District Representative. Bill, how exciting to finally meet you. We've had a couple emails back and forth, and welcome to the studios. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, and it'll be a good opportunity to share with some of the local folks some of the things that I've been exposed to down in Topeka anyway.
There you go. And it's very new for you, and we've got our seasoned Senator Elaine Bowers. Good morning, Elaine.
Good morning, Michelle.
We're so
happy to be here.
Always, always. We try to make it fun and informative for your constituents and our listeners, and those are one and the same. Well, let's see. We always start with committees so that folks know kind of your, well, I don't know, specialty area wouldn't necessarily be, but you do kind of become a specialist in those areas because of all those committee meetings that you have to go to. And so we're going to go ahead and start with Elaine.
Well, yes, and coming from the House, I served in the House for 6 years, like Bill, where he is at now, and moved to the Senate. Our committee structure is a little different, where we have hour-long meetings, where they're an hour and a half long meeting in the House. And something when you hear Senate time, why we run late, is our meetings are 1 hour back to back to back to back, and we have no breaks in between. So I do run from meetings to meetings. I have 4, and this year 8:30 starts Transportation Committee, and this is the first time in 13 years I've been on the Transportation Committee, and I'm a car dealer in real life, so I'm just absolutely thrilled to be on that committee. And then I go to Ethics, Elections, and Local Government, which I chair. This will be the 3rd year that I'm chairing that committee. And then straight to Judiciary. The listeners might like to know that we have 2 lawyers in the state Senate now, where we had 0 the last 3 years. So they're both on my Judiciary Committee. And then my last one is Utilities. Mm-hmm. And then we have special assignments through the year. One of my favorites is the Historical Preservation Committee, where we get to tell people what can be on the state grounds, which is very important, that we don't have a lot of just things plopped down, but it goes through a committee process. So that's an exciting committee to be on, too.
Right. I'm sure that they regulate that pretty well.
And I continue to be the Senate Majority Whip. That's an elected position by my Republican colleagues for 4 years. So I'm still doing that duties, too.
Well, and as the year began, and we started with a brand new governor, Laura Kelly, you had the honor to walk her in, accompany her as she entered the Senate floor.
Yes, and it's the House floor, actually.
Oh, House floor, okay.
And Bill invited me to sit with him, so our the senator sat with our House members, and there are 4 reps in the Senate district, so they share me, which I'm thrilled to death to do, so I was very happy to sit with Bill. But it is an honor to have been asked to do that, and leadership selects people to do that, so I walked in with a Democrat woman, and a Republican woman, a Democrat lady, walked in the governor, and the judges are escorted in, and so there's a protocol with this every year. So it was a very...
Well, it's very ceremonial.
It is.
And
very
you're right,
much.
It is a great honor to be able to do that. And it's a nice bipartisan way to start your year.
It certainly is.
And speaking of, you had said this was 3 women walking in. I'm sure some of those on the floor went, oh my gosh, what are we in for now?
What is it?
There goes
exactly
the neighborhood, right? No, not at all. 25% of our legislators are women.
Yes, in the House it's just a little less than that, and that's we're right at the national women ratio of men to women across the nation. So we're right there, and I think it's nice to have that mix too, and a lot of the women are younger too, so we have a nice generational mix there as well.
Okay, very good.
And there's 40 members in the Senate and 125 members in the House total, so 165 of us, so you can take 25% of that for the ladies.
Sure, I'll let you do the math. All right, once again, our 106th House District Representative Bill Pannbacker. Bill, which committees are you on?
Well, in the House, we're assigned to 3 committees, and my committee, the 3 that I'm on, Ag is one of them, and that's pretty natural for me, being a farmer and with a training in veterinary medicine, and I've spent my entire career involved with agriculture, so that was kind of a natural for me. Then another one I'm on is corrections and juvenile justice, and that's kind of the other way. I'm a little bit of a duck out of water in that committee. We went around and introduced the committee members introduced themselves, and most of them had been in judicial or law enforcement, or had a lot of experience in that, and I really don't have any. But I thought that's not bad in a representative form of government to have diverse backgrounds. So some of the things that people who are well versed in a discipline take things for granted, and some of us who aren't well versed in that particular discipline maybe ask some questions, or at least are informed of things that the general public isn't particularly aware of. My third committee, besides Ag and Corrections and Juvenile Justice, is a new committee called Rural Revitalization, and that's there are a lot of challenges in that committee. It's a good group of they're all good people on these committees, but it's a good cross section of the state. I would like to on the committee. I brought this up. One of the members of Rural Revitalization lives 2 blocks from Missouri, down in east central Kansas. Another one is from Weston, and his ranch borders the Colorado border. And when I go out to the farm northeast of Washington, I can see the wind turbines in Nebraska. So we have good geographic distribution on that. But the Rural Revitalization is wanting to deal with about 85 counties in the state have had chronic population loss, and we're trying to address some of the. Right now, we're getting background on the history of what's happened. It's a lot easier to identify a problem than it is to come up with solutions for one. But we're going to hope over time to come up with some solutions for the population loss in rural Kansas. Not all in western Kansas, because southeast Kansas has some of the same issues that the western part of the state does too.
Right, indeed. We really want to thank to our sponsor. I've been doing this for over 12 years, and AT&T has been with us this entire time as our sponsor, and that means an awful lot to us because it gives us the opportunity to use this airtime and to bring me in to assist the two of you in getting these messages out. So we do thank AT&T, and we'll be talking about AT&T a little bit more as time goes on this morning. But once again, our thanks to them, long time sponsor of the program.
Well,
Okay.
and we also talk about broadband expansion, which is very important to us, kind of like the electric co-ops that were formed decades ago, how we're looking at that. So AT&T would be essential with that, too, in our area.
It's good to see that type of advocacy, too, for rural areas that need that broadband. I'm sure that somewhere in a city somewhere somebody is saying, why do people way out in the country need that? And, I think anybody that lives out here, and especially those on the farm, you want the same access to world information and being able to put out your information as anybody else. So it's pretty clear and obvious to us.
And also working from home. That's
Exactly.
become a popular trend these days also, so that we'd have the opportunities. In fact, we might just piggyback into Lieutenant Governor has a program now, and it's entitled Office of Rural Prosperity. Mm-hmm. So it ties right into what Bill is doing with his committee. And one of the first things that he did was searching for businesses in rural areas to supply cookies for the governor's inauguration ball. And he actually chose a company in Clyde, Wendy's Party Treats, and she brought 300 sugar cookies to the Capitol for the governor's reception. So that was one
with
of
the
his
state seal
yes,
on it.
Yes, and they were very beautiful too. So that was one of his first attempts at reaching out to rural businesses, and I think it was a success.
Oh, that is neat. There is so much in rural America and rural Kansas in particular. I'm always amazed when I listen to the Kansas Sampler Gals.
Yes, Marcy
Penner, and of course she's so good about bringing that information to the forefront for the rest of us. And around Christmas, she does that. In fact, where she says, "What product do you have? Let's hear about them," so everybody knows what you have. But rural Kansas has some amazing folks, and you're right. Working from home, we have an example here in town. A gentleman that originated, his job originates in Wichita, but he works from Clay Center, and of course, everything is done on the internet. So very good. All right, let's talk about some of the issues that Senator Bowers was discussing prior to us going on the air. You had talked about Senate Bill number 9. I do not know how these things work, so maybe you can fill me in, because I'm sure the rest of us have the same question. How in the world can the state just now be making the 2016 Capers payment?
Yes.
Because obviously people are being paid their retirement, yet we're just now making a 2016 payment.
Well, here we might just talk. Bills are just starting to churn through our committee,
Sure.
so there's very few. And this is one that will be working on the Senate floor next week. So when we go back Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll be on general orders. This Senate Bill 9 was sent out of Ways and Means, and we just call it the Capers Bill.
Okay.
But truly, it was a delay in making the 2016 payment of $97 million. Plus interest at 8%. That was what the agreement was in that budget. So this is saying we will make that payment, and now it's $115 million, and it costs the state each month $637,000. So
each month it's delayed.
Each month is delayed. So, and by the way, we should say that our Capers Fund is very solvent. It has $19 billion in it. So we're not running out of money.
Okay.
It's managed very well, and I might go ahead and say it. The 25-year average interest rate is 8.1%. So the people at Capers have managed this very, very well. So we just delayed a payment. Senate Bill 9 says we will repay that. So that's what's going on right now with that Senate bill. The other bill coming up is a tax bill that maybe you've been hearing about, and this is from Trump's tax reform bill coming down from the federal government, and it's a 3-year plan, and it also allows so it's a windfall back to the Kansas taxpayers is what this bill is saying. It just came out of committee Thursday, the tax committee. It's a special select committee that was formed, and we decouple in this bill from the federal government, so we don't itemize with the federal government and the state. They could be separate. You could file a state return and itemize and not do that at the federal level. So that's part of this bill. The other exciting thing to me is bringing back the mortgage tax deduction. A big one also is the health care bills that we pay. We can deduct those at coming in at different rates, like 50%, 75%, and our property tax, that we'd be able to write off some of the deductions as well. So that's what this tax bill, just in a nutshell, has. And it, again, will be coming across the Senate floor, so you can be watching for more information on this.
Okay, this is, everybody's calling it a windfall. And so what is it that you're trying to decide, whether or not the state keeps the money?
Or if the money is returned back to the taxpayers.
Oh.
So that is the discussion that we'll be having on this bill. And I also like to remind people, a bill is just someone's idea.
Sure.
So this is an idea that has come out of the tax committee that we're going to talk about now on the Senate floor.
Okay, and so I'm guessing there's a lot of folks that are saying, well, yeah, give us the money back.
Yeah, this is true. And then also in April, we have a consensus revenue report on how the state is doing. The other argument with that is let's wait to see the report before we jump on a tax bill. Mm-hmm. So there's two different ways of looking at that. But this is the one that the Senate has decided to see what support there is, and there's a lot of moving parts in that too. There's more to it than that. Those are the highlights, but it is dealing with the federal law that came down to us, and now we'll be
Would
dealing with that.
Would the state still have that money to be able to pay it back?
It depends on how much, what we want our budget to look like at the end of the session.
And I'm sure Kansans are hollering, well, it's our money, isn't it?
It's called Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 and tax windfall.
Okay. All right. We also had discussed, prior to going on the air, discussing the Farm Bureau bill. This is something that I wasn't as familiar. It's called the Associate Member Plan. Bill, do you want to talk about that a little bit as we begin this discussion?
Yes, I'm was informed of this in a not on the floor, but in a caucus presentation, and basically, I believe that Farm Bureau it wants to offer a benefit to its members, and you can't. I'm not quite sure how this works, but you cannot call it an insurance policy. But it. I'm not sure about the legalese on how all that works out, but it is a member benefit. But it will allow individual farmers and ranchers in Kansas who are Farm Bureau members to have access to group health benefits. I think that's, from what I could gather, how that works out. And because they're one of the when you're an individual, you fall into a different category, and sometimes the cost is quite high and almost prohibitive. Well, not prohibitive, but it's significant.
Right.
And if you can go in and get in with a group, it's of benefit, and it's a unique way that the Farm Bureau has done to address a need that's across Kansas with their farmers and ranchers.
Am I understanding this correctly, that it would be pretty much any type of organization that has members would, in other words, it's probably not just Farm Bureau, is that correct? But for us, it falls down to Farm Bureau. In other words, any type of group that has associate members?
I imagine the legislation obviously can't be specific to one group, so I'm assuming the legislation will cover any group that falls into this. Farm Bureau is the one that took the lead to develop the program, and the legislation will need incorporate their program.
All right. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said for individuals to purchase insurance under ACA, it can be cost prohibitive. I think for many folks it is. We've heard from a lot of folks that have given us that indication, let's put it that way.
And we might add that the rates are on that individual. It's not based on age. It is on that, it's individual specific. So that is how the premium will be decided, and no one would be turned away also. And this is allowable by the ACA Act as well. So there are, if I'm not mistaken, 9 other associations that already do this.
Okay.
So this is specific to Farm Bureau, and they are taking the lead on this, and that we need to make sure it's a membership benefit. You would need to belong to Farm Bureau in order to be part of this group that is being.
All right, and you said 9 other organizations here in Kansas,
in Kansas.
Okay,
yes.
okay, all right. So, but they're having to look at it specifically for Farm Bureau. For what reason? If there's 9 other organizations that already have it, do you know why there's a difference?
Well, this is specifically drawn up for Farm Bureau.
Okay,
and why they haven't been included? Maybe they hadn't asked, but now they are. And this is the lead way, and it is Senate Bill 32, if people would like to look at that. Okay. And also it's voluntary. You can't be denied, and you terminate it yourself as an individual or a family.
When somebody has an associate member benefit like that, do they also have to adhere to the when there's open enrollment times and that type of thing? Do you know, or it's yet to be seen? Okay. I'm guessing. Okay.
And there will be a process that's set up after this passes of
sure.
who the insurance companies are and follow the rules
All right.
from there on out.
So if folks are in favor of this or any of the other things that we're talking about today, as these things are coming across the Senate and the House floor, that is what your legislators are there for, and they of course want to hear from you. We're going to be talking about how to contact each of these legislators as the program goes on. So make it a point to have a pen and a piece of paper ready so you can be writing down these bill numbers and also their contact information, and you can contact each of them in regards to that. And you know what? I don't have the date in front of me, but we're having another legislative update coming up in March. And I'm sorry I don't have that date in front of me, but we always announce it and we have a lot of announcements that inform you that it is coming up. And so make sure that you're listening to KCLY News and throughout the day because that is when they mention it. But it is mid-March, I believe, when that happens. And again, that one is also sponsored by AT&T. Our thanks to them. Okay, let's just for a moment, if you don't mind, Bill, how in the world did you enter politics? I could tell just by a little bit of what you said that you were obviously quite interested because you're out doing chores and listening to programs such as these on the radio. But tell me about your involvement and your desire to go ahead and take the step to become a legislator.
Well, I some of it's by default. When you're 70 years old and you've been in the community for 40 years, you served on a lot of different political entities. Some of them are elective. I've been on the school board. I've been on the co-op board. I've been on church boards. I've been on the REA board. So I'm aware of politics by default. And actually, this last summer, a friend of mine or an acquaintance who I've known for 30 or more years, about a week before the filing deadline, called up and asked if I would be interested. And I jokingly say, well, I'm easily flattered. But I kind of looked into it, and like I say, at 70 years old, I've had a lifetime of experiences that if people think I'm qualified to address some of the issues at the state level, I'm willing to do that. And that's kind of how it all came down. When we were talking about the Farm Bureau inspired insurance program, I will have to admit this is my third week into this job of legislator, and it's the old analogy that it's trying to take a sip of water from a fire hydrant is pretty appropriate, because there's a lot of information that comes flying by, and you grasp what you can, and we referred to the committee situation. So most of my concentration right now so far has been at the committee level, and we work for an hour and a half. Our committees are an hour and a half, and both in rural revitalization and in corrections and juvenile justice, we've had presenters that occupy pretty much the full hour and a half length, and so it's been it's been like getting a drink from a fire hydrant. There's a lot of information that goes by, and trying to do the best I can to assimilate that information into logical thought. But in some of the things that come up on the Senate side, my information, I grant I'm a little bit closer to the source than folks out here in north central Kansas, but from an official standpoint, we haven't really debated anything on the House floor other than some rules that involved transparency, which are good, but from an official debate, I haven't participated in too much of that. Most everything has been informative at the committee level so far, and well, like I say, I'm 3 weeks into this job, and it's a great job, and it's a very learning experience.
No kidding.
I jokingly tell people, who else would have the opportunity to be a 70-year-old freshman? I mean, that's one of the blessings of my life.
Oh my goodness. Taking a sip of water from a fire hydrant. I can imagine, I've spent a little bit of time, very little time on the floor, and I would see that the same way, because just listening in for those few moments and trying to gather something to bring back as far as news. Yeah. But wow, it is things. Because they're so accustomed to how that routine goes, and it just goes and goes and goes. It's not like you can stop and say, wait a minute, I didn't quite understand what just happened. The freshmen would be laughed at.
Yeah, and it's, they're a little bit different. In the Rural Revitalization Committee, those are problems that I've seen that happen for the 40 or 50 years I've been involved. This is not new information. It's not but it's concise, and it's presented in a way that you see the charts and you think, yeah, this is how it happened. For me in corrections, it's kind of the other side. This is new information to me. My involvement, luckily, I don't have much involvement in corrections. I always thought that was probably a good thing to try to stay off the second page, I guess is the best way of putting it. I've been fortunate in my life to not be on the second page very often.
Wow. Very good. Well, I'm sure that as time goes on, and probably by next year at this time, when we're here in this same spot discussing these things, you'll be able to fill us in a little bit more. Do you have to fill a certain amount of time once you're on a committee? Are you assigned for a year, 2 years at a time, or?
Well, it normally is in the Senate, we did have some changes over when the House sorted out their committees, so we did have some movement, but normally you're on there for your 4 years.
Oh, okay.
But you can be moved to another committee. It's up to the Senate president's opinion at that time, and we see some chairmanships change in the past. We've caught that, and normally you are where you land, and unless there's an opportunity to move. And we had, in fact, the lieutenant governor and the governor both were senators, so there were 2 vacant spots there. So that shifted around some of the minority leader too on committees, and adding committees, like I was given transportation, and so you can be assigned to more as well.
Right. I'll pause just for a moment. Once again, our program is being brought to you by AT&T. And by the way, I was informed just a few moments ago, one of our coworkers held up a sign in the window there that our next legislative update here on KCLY will be March 16th. You'll be hearing from Senator Tom Hawk at that time, and Representative Susie Carlson, also new on the House floor. So that will be exciting to chat with them. Again, that one is March 16th, and I'll mention that again before we're done, as well as each of your contact information. So we'll try to remember that. Okay, let's talk about KDOT. I thought it was interesting. You had mentioned this is your first time on transportation, and you are in the car sales business.
Yes, and we have been for 31 years now. So I always want to be on transportation. The sad thing is transportation meets at the same time agriculture meets. And I do want to represent the ag world where we come from, but Bill covers that for us. And that makes me very happy that we're a team and we can do that together. But to be on transportation, we're not only our rules for my industry of the car world is dealt with, but also we have driver's license, all sorts of the agency of Department of Revenue come through there too. So it's good to know when you're on the cutting edge of what the new driver's license will look like and what do we need to do, and we can talk about real ideas.
Well, it also covers aviation and trails even in the state.
And in fact, Kansas is the 4th largest with highways across the nation. So you think about that. That is a lot of highways and a lot of bridges that they look over. And Senate District 36, there's 6 districts in Kansas. We cover 4 of those. So it's a big territory of the highway system. And So, fourth largest, we have almost 25,000 bridges. 5,000 of those fall under KDOT's jurisdiction. So they're inspecting the bridges as well, which is for our safety.
Right.
And as far as the funding, it's $1.8 billion. And
Right.
that's a lot of different sources, but we have, the sales tax, federal funds come into that. So a big agency with a budget. And there's a new Secretary of Transportation. We have to confirm the new secretaries, too. We haven't talked about Senate oversees the confirmation hearings and then confirmation vote. So her name is Julie Lorenz, and she has come from the Transportation Department. She left for a while and then came back, and she is actually leading, or one of the leading people on the Transportation Task Force that's been traveling around the state this summer. And they have their report out on the new projects they would like to do, and so they're looking for the funding opportunities for that. So It's a very fascinating update that she gave to us, and to know that not only are we rails, we're highway, we're aviation.
Right.
It's very fascinating.
Now that you're on that committee, do you think that your view and opinion of borrowing from the, quote, bank of KDOT will have changed? I mean, I don't know where you were before, I should say, but has your perspective been tweaked at all? Tell me about that.
Well, I do hate borrowing from one agency to another, and I was around when this came about to be. It was a 1-cent sales tax increase, and that so much of that was earmarked for transportation. So I see where the sweeping of that comes from, because they saw it as sales tax dollars that maybe should have went into the general fund instead. As our revenues in Kansas increase, I'm hoping we can be on a more stable footing so that we can stop borrowing with the Bank of KDOT, is what we've said in committee. So, and also in the governor's budget, she proposes reamortizing capers, which is like a second mortgage on your house. So there again, that is also borrowing again. And to me, it's more important to pay down the debt that we have rather than borrow out to 2050, where in 10 years, KDOT will be financially secure at 100%. And that's exciting to me. We're only 10 years away from that. So if we can get away from shifting funds, that would make me very happy.
Right.
We just have to be in a stable area with our revenues coming in at a good amount like it used to.
Okay. I want to ask Bill, in the past we talk about these gut and go types. As you were approaching, and even now as you are sitting in your committees and sitting on the House floor, do you look at things like these various bills that in the past have been what they call gut and go? Have those intimidated you a bit, made you angry? Tell me about how you've approached that, how you see that.
Well, I think it's just a function of transparency. To me, a bill should be defined as and named in what it covers, and it shouldn't be amended to, and so that the name of the bill doesn't represent what is in it. I think in the Rules Committee, and that's really the only thing I've had to vote on so far at the House side, is changing the rules. So there has to be some original part of the bill that is in the bill. It can't be totally gutted and then changed over to something else, if I read that correctly. And I think that's just transparency, and so those of us out here who don't pull up the House debate every day, we have other lives that we try to do out here, aren't confused as to what's going on in Topeka. That's the way I would see it.
Well,
I mean, we all have things that we need to do. That's why Elaine and I are down there to watch these things, and we spend a lot more time than somebody who's out there teaching kids or feeding cows.
Well, and I've as a spectator myself, not being somebody who spends all of their time at Topeka, as a news person, I've looked at this and been very confused. So I can see why transparency on things like this specifically are very important. So I understand the new rule as far as the gut and go. is that you, when you sponsor a bill, your name has to be attached to it. Were there people who were on bills anonymously? Is that...
It would be called a committee bill. A bill would be introduced in committee, and that's why minutes are very important. When you go back and review the minutes, who offered this bill to the committee that the committee voted to accept in. So you have a committee bill, but now to have a name attached to that, it is in the minutes that you can find. Sometimes it's more difficult, but this would be more transparent for the public to see quickly. But you can sign on to bills also.
All right, and you had mentioned being very cautious not to sign on to a bill because...
the contents could change.
The content, yeah exactly. So you had mentioned one. This is a crazy example. But you talked about cockfighting.
Yes, chicken fighting in Kansas, and this was my very first year as Bill is in his position right now. But I was on Fed and State Affairs, and we called that the Sin Committee because that's where alcohol, all sorts of those topics would go through that were controversial and such, like pornography bills would go through there. So it's a really intense committee to be on, but one of them was chicken fighting. Okay. And it was gutted in committee, and a pro-life bill was inserted instead. And not everyone who had signed on to this chicken bill would have been in favor of the new contents. So I became very cautious very early on that my name, and your name is still attached to that number of the bill, and that bill title is the same, but the contents are totally different.
See, that makes absolutely no sense to me. No wonder people have a hard time trusting what's going on in politics. Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is a perfect example.
And it's kind of silly. We even have to have this conversation of transparency because it's very logical to us here and very business like what we're doing. That is someone's idea that obviously someone wanted it to have some attention, and to have it stripped away and something else put in its place that they want to talk about is just not fair.
Right. My goodness. Okay, so are we guaranteed now that when a bill says it's about X, Y, or Z, it's not going to be about A, B, or C?
Guarantee might be a little strong language.
We're getting there. I have to tell you, as a committee chairman, I'm very particular that I've given my committee assistant, enough time to get in the minutes who wanted this bill, who offered it. That is very important to us, that it's very transparent at our level. Now, our Senate rules are good for 4 years. Okay. So ours haven't been opened up, where the new members of the House come in for 2 years. We're in for 4 years. Okay. So we'll probably have this discussion. It's not in our rules, but it is what we do. And so we all understand that as well.
All right. Senator Bowers, you were mentioning Senate Bill 50, which has to do with raising the caps on hunting and fishing licenses, the cost.
Well, this one it's been introduced in Natural Resources and Ag in the Senate side, and just a lot of chatter about it all of a sudden. So just because a bill is introduced in committee doesn't mean it's going to have a hearing, doesn't mean it'll be voted out of committee. Okay. So it's got a long way to go, but this is getting some attention from the wildlife, the hunters and fishermen back here, and it's not allowing the state to raise your fishing license, hunting licenses right now, but it is raising the cap. For instance, fishing license now are $25, and that's what it says in the statute. That's the most allowable charge. The Department of Wildlife introduced this bill that they would like to see the cap at $50. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that they will increase it to $50, but they have the ability to do that. Okay. So in this Bill 50 that people can pull up on our website and look at as well is the increased caps, but not necessarily the increased fee that the department would charge. Okay. A couple of years ago, we had the same issue that we were facing in regards to the guest tax, transient guest tax. That would be the tax. A lot of folks will call it the bed tax. That's the extra tax that you pay for a hotel room. And those monies go to, travel and tourism committees, that type of thing. And so I believe the state raised that. And, of course, people were concerned, now we have to pay more to sleep in a hotel. But it's up to the local community as to whether or not they will have their guest tax that high. So, but in this case, it's going to be up to the state as to whether or not they would raise
that amount.
Yeah, and the fishing and hunting license in
Right.
particular doubling from 25 to 50 is concerning, and I understand why people are calling us from home. So, like I said, this bill may
Right.
not see the light of day. It has been introduced, and quickly people started to call on it this
Right.
week. So it is creating some excitement too. I personally have no problem having out-of-state hunters, fishermen pay more. The out-of-state is more important to me than, and if they leave I think $25 is fair.
Sure.
On each one of those two, and we want our young people to be encouraged to hunt and fish, and to have a challenge of a more expensive license
Right.
it is a challenge, I believe.
Right. Very good. I'm really encouraged, too, I think, by a lot of different organizations that offer wildlife opportunities for young people. There's mentorships and so on, and that's always very, very encouraging. Let's take a look at some of the issues that Bill would like, or us. I'm a little bit too comfortable with you folks. Representative Pannbacker. Nice to have that title, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
I'm Bill. I always will be. One of the things I would like to, Elaine talked, Senator Bowers, we'll be formal here, talked about the hunting and fishing license, and for the last 15 or 20 years on our farm, we've participated in walk-in fishing, and I think that's a self-funded program. So the hunting and fishing licenses will actually go to improved access for hunting and fishing. This way, if I walk-in fishing, people, it's posted that way, and people they don't have to seek permission. We have a place on the creek that folks they can go down there and fish, and then we have a pond that's kind of handy. And it must be pretty good fishing, because I've seen the same car there 2 or 3 days in a row. The other folks can catch fish out of that pond. I don't seem to be able to, but so that's kind of another side of that. It's a self-funded program, and if we increase the funds, we may be going to increase the opportunities for fishing and hunting throughout the state, which is good.
Right. Well, and I think that with any tax, we have to look at what is the benefit for me going to be. And like our streets here in Clay Center, the city decided through an election that they would be willing to pay extra tax to pay for street improvements. Well, fortunately, our city has shown us that they are going to be very responsible with that money. And it's pretty much the same way, I think, with any tax. And if the taxpayer is not seeing that responsibility, they're not going to want to pay it. And I'm not an angler myself. I have been from time to time, but I have seen a lot of improvement in access to waterways, just because I'm out there doing photography and that type of thing. So,
well, and what will come out of this bill too is, when was the last time they were raised?
Well, I was going to ask that. How
is
long
the
has it been?
discussion,
Right?
And so that's when a bill is introduced, it's opportunity to analyze and what would the state do with this extra money if they even raise them, because they may not have to. It doesn't say you will. So it opens up the conversation of pros and cons, and lets the public weigh in through us or by coming to be a conferee in committee too. So discussion is a good thing.
A couple of years ago, we discussed a lot having to do with the state budget, and I remember just cringing at the thought of more cuts to the schools and so on. And I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, they changed the I'm drawing a blank here, the expectation of what taxes would be coming in. And once that was changed, and of course we also changed the whole tax.
Repealed the tax cut.
There you go.
Yes.
Thank you. In general. So my question is, now that all of that has taken place, and
well, when we look at the budget,
Yeah.
Kansas is ahead. When we came in January, $900 million.
Right. And so some of us are sitting here saying, well, how come we didn't have that money before? Was it just because of the tax cuts? Are we doing better?
Yes.
Is it because we lowered those expectations, in the budget, those that were planning the budgets, et cetera, et cetera? So
Well, there were a lot of cuts that have happened the last few years before Bill came in. And if you remember, Governor Brownback's tax plan removed all income tax off LLCs. So we had Incs changing to LLCs to take advantage of the law, which was the law. So for 5 years, LLCs paid no state income tax. And when we repealed that last year, it brought all of us back on to pay our quarterly taxes. So you see more corporate tax being paid, and sales tax has increased too. Not the rate, but people buying more too. We might just piggytail onto that with the House has had hearings, and it's constantly going through the internet sales tax.
Oh, yes.
The tax that we are supposed to pay in when we order online. And in my world, we call that compensation use tax, and I have to do it quarterly as a business, analyze what I bought online. Did they charge me sales tax or not? So I turn that in as a business, and individuals are supposed to do that too. So if you have a brick and mortar store in Kansas, you are to collect sales tax. And there's some internet that you can order off the internet. They don't have this brick and mortar in Kansas, that they haven't been collecting Kansas sales tax. So there is a federal case that went through the court system and says, yes, it's allowable. So now states are having to propose their own plans on how you bring this back into the state government. So we're almost there on the internet sales tax collection. And if you think about like the jewelry store downtown, or the camera shops, things like that, how we bring that money back and it stays in Kansas, where our store owners pay property tax in our county. So
well, it only seems right.
So our revenues are higher, Michelle,
right.
that you would say. So now it's a balance of what does the budget look like, where does the money come from, and how do we spend it?
Right.
And that's what we're all trying to sort out. And it's a messy process, and it won't be done. And we're there 90 days and sometime longer. And the governor proposed a 1-year budget rather than a 2-year budget, which is we've been under the last 8 years, where you have the bulk of it the first year and then you tweak it the second year. So
it would seem like that might work better.
So we're going to have 1-year budget and then how do we spend this money? Because we worked hard to get that $900 million in the account.
Right.
How do we spend it wisely? And prioritize is what we're doing now. It looks kind of messy, but it's what's important to us representing people back home.
And let's kind of slip back into the education piece of that funding. Obviously, the largest portion of our taxes go to education, and you said $900 million. Well, that's not anywhere close to the how many billion we need to put back into education. And the governor's hoping to do that. So, any thoughts on that process from either one of you?
Well, we can say in the governor's budget, she proposed, and if you remember, the Supreme Court didn't accept the legislature's attempt last year to satisfy the judgment. And what they said is come back with the inflation piece that we didn't include, which was $90 million.
Okay.
So the governor has put it in her budget. And, surprisingly, Bill, we haven't discussed that yet. It hasn't been a bill that's been debated, at least on the Senate side.
Well, it's coming because she said it would. So
one of the things that if I get this correctly, that we will deal with the education part of the budget separately and have that taken care of. I think by the 1st of March is when we're going to do it. So it's going to be coming down the road pretty fast, but that will be taken care of in a more timely fashion, and will be addressed, and then we can move on to the other things because education is 50% of the general fund, as I recall, if I have that correct. Mm-hmm. So it's a significant thing, but it needs to be addressed, and once that falls into place, then we can allocate funds to the other programs that are needed. And we have one of the things I know about transportation. I'm not on a transportation committee, but I did attend 2 of the transportation task force hearings that were within a proximate area because I wanted to kind of understand how the process worked as much as anything else. But it's like anything else. If you skimp on maintenance and just do enough to get by, eventually your roads are going to deteriorate at at a more expensive level down the road. So adequate maintenance should be at least adequate, not just barely maintain. It's and that takes money. Everything
takes money.
Everything takes money.
Yeah.
And that's just.
And there again, it's prioritizing what's important to us in that task force report that came out.
Where are we at in the 10-year budget plan for KDOT? Or are we not in a 10-year plan at the moment?
Well, we still are, and just the funds to finish just complete that, which a lot of that is maintenance, is where the money has went to. They've postponed some projects in order to do more maintenance. And now the task force sent out their recommendations, and I'm not really familiar with that yet. I haven't had a briefing on it, but we still are in that 10-year T-Works.
Okay.
I'm not on the committee. One of the things that I think people need to think about this is a changing paradigm in tax. Historically, we've always taxed fossil fuels, or I call it splitting the carbon bond. That's how we get our money to maintain the roads. Well, what happens if electric vehicles become more prevalent? And I believe the industry is there that if energy storage, the battery technology is there, that we may not be splitting that carbon bond to generate the funds to that mechanism for generating funds may not be there. So how do you tax electric vehicles when the energy generation comes from a different source? Because weight on highways is still weight on highways, and they're going to wear out at the same rate, but you're taxing. So
currently there is no tax on. How is that being taxed?
Well, I think we're in a changing time.
Well,
and there's a lot of things that just so folks are thinking about that. That's all I want to say is we need to. We've always taxed fossil fuels to maintain our roads, and that's by and large how they get built and maintained, and that may be a different paradigm coming in the future.
Has that even come up?
Yes, it has, and the secretary noted that in her update to us too, and also fees for commercial trucking. That are they adequate enough with the wear and tear that put on the bridges and the highway? So, different fees sorted out in different places in the agency. So they are thinking outside the box. And electric cars was one that was mentioned.
Yeah, times they are changing.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly something I had not thought about. But as you're speaking, I'm picturing these, because I've seen the charging stations like in Michigan. And so I've not seen one here. But yeah, if you plug in, surely we're going to have to find a way to tax that to the same amount that we're taxing our fossil fuels.
They're using the same roads.
Right.
I mean, it's just something to think about. That's the main thing.
Maybe we'll be taxed on the number of miles we actually drive.
There are trial periods in, I believe Oregon is trying that, and to see how that works too. So we can learn from other states.
Yeah.
And if they're already trying it, then we can see if it works
well,
before we try here.
That'd be an administrative challenge.
Oh, wouldn't it? Yeah. Yeah, somebody'd find a way to move that odometer. I think they used to be easier to move. We are down to about the last 8 minutes or so we'll have to keep that in mind as we finish up here. Once again, we are so appreciative of AT&T, longtime sponsor of the program. I almost said up close. Of our legislative update. Let's talk about how to contact you folks. Obviously, we've discussed a few things. We are very, very early in the legislative session. This program was going to take place next week. We had to change things up a little bit, and it is hard. We have to fit in 4 legislators, you two and the other 2 that we'll have in March. All of your schedules plus our on-air schedule. So it's a logistical challenge each time we set up the legislative update. So with that said, folks are listening, and we've brought up a couple of things I know that they want to talk about. So they're going to need to contact each of you. Bill, let's start with you. What is the easiest and best way for individuals to contact you?
I believe the easiest way is to go on the House website. And the information will all be there.
Okay.
But what you look for on email It's bill.pannbacker@house.ks.gov. It's all on the website. That's where it is. I'm on the first floor on 166 West.
And you occasionally do have visitors up there.
I have an office, yeah, and folks stop by. It's good to let me know ahead of time that you might be coming in, because I'll try to let you know when I have an opening in my schedule. My phone number is 785-296-7637. Like I say, I think that's on the house website also. Right. So that information's all there, but I'd sure be glad to visit with the folks from home.
Just for the heck of it, let's walk over that address again. It's bill.pannbacker
at house.ks.gov.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right, so it's not, as you said, it's not Kansas, it's KS. And Senator Bowers.
And Bill is right. It's very easy to find us on the state website, and I'll run through that real quick. www.kslegislature.org.
Okay.
And it's a fabulous website where you can see what bills are going through each committee. You can click on the bill, you can read the content, read the fiscal note, but then you can also find the roster of the House and the Senate, and it's in alphabetical order.
Are there any live streaming taking place?
Yes, there are too. There is, and I can give you that information, and you can update the listeners at some point too. So you can YouTube stream, you can watch us live, you can listen to us in our committee hearings also. So that's all new technology within the last couple years. Even.
That's what I thought. Okay.
So it's very fascinating. But if you click on our name, it opens up our page, and then you can click on our email right there, and it's simple to send an email right from there. And I've learned through the years that's the best way to contact us. And it's if you have an email that says forward this to your legislature, we get hundreds of those, and those are form letters where it's much better if you just put a few thoughts down. I've been listening to this bill. Here are my thoughts on this. If you change it to be this, and that's an amendment that Bill and I can offer either on the Senate or House floor or even in committee. So just ideas from home, how we can make that bill better or make it stop too if people don't like it at all. And I'm very similar to Bill's. It's elaine.bowers@senate.ks.gov.
Okay.
Very simple. And my phone number, 296-7389. And we both have assistants. I think Bill may share his assistant with another one or two rep. I have my assistant, also the committee assistant, and my assistant. Her name is Randy. And we always, if we can sit down, we can return phone calls. And sometimes I've called people as early as 7 o'clock in the morning, and which is when I go in just to have a little quiet time to sit and return emails and make phone calls too.
I know from checking on the website and from calling up there that what we have to remember is that you folks are working for us, and I am very, very pleased at how well that has happened. And I don't know that I have any more weight because I'm a journalist or not, but they usually are very, very responsive. And when you have a question about something there, when you have to call, folks are usually very, very helpful. So I do appreciate that. Again, our program is brought to you by AT&T. Those folks are just amazing. And every year they call and say, we want to sponsor a legislative update again. And so we very much appreciate that. Again, it makes... it gives this opportunity for the two of you this hour where folks can listen to what's happening, what's coming up, etc. And again, I'll remind our listeners that Senator Tom Hawk and Representative Susie Carlson will be here with us March 16th, 10 a.m., just like this program. So we have 3 minutes left if you have one last thought.
And Bill and I will be in Marysville the first weekend in March, and AT&T also sponsors that coffee with the Chamber of Commerce. Yes. So they're very good to us in this area. We really appreciate what they do. Bill mentioned if you're coming to town to let us know in advance, and we'll watch for you in the Capitol. It's always good to see faces from home and not the people like the lobbyists that work around us or the agency people. It's just good to see our folks. And we have a lot of people who come in the evenings to receptions to see us. So if we know you're staying for a reception, let us know. We'll make sure that we're there because they run all at the same time, but those are important places for us to be with our people from home. And then just to get in that we take pages and shadows also. So pages are anywhere from age 12 on up. And the House is a different experience than the Senate. I was a House page 30 plus years ago for Representative Bill Fuller from Milton Vale, and I have my black and white picture in my office, but now they're colored. So I'm thrilled to death that the kids get their picture taken with the governor still, but a little more modern. And we can email those too as well.
Right.
And a shadow can hang out with us all day, just follows us around. And normally they're just high school students who want to learn more about the process.
Very good. All right. Bill, last thought?
I do have opportunity for pages. I have some dates assigned that I can have those, and I do have a few folks that have sent pages people who have expressed an interest in being a page, but I still have some slots that are open, and so get a hold of me on that. And I do appreciate hearing from the folks at home and seeing how things are playing out in the country.
Very good. All right. Your legislators want to hear from you, and this is certainly one opportunity for you to hear from them and other opportunities as well. Once again, legislative update. These are held twice annually here on KCLY, and it is a product of the KCLY News Department. Again, our thanks to AT&T. Our thanks to State Senator from the 36th Senate District, Senator Elaine Bowers, thank you. And from the 106th House District, Representative Bill Pannbacker, accompanied today by his lovely wife, Chris Pannbacker, who's also a journalist, which is wonderful. Good to have you in the studio. I appreciate Bernie Fancella. He is our engineer today. I see him in the other room, and he always assists us, gives us some good guidance when we run the program. For the KCLY News Department, I'm Michelle Tessaro.